Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. Today is a good day. Not too cold here, but it's not a bad day to do a show. We'll be talking about an adversarial China today, and of course, Ukraine can't stop. All these topics discussed today on the Council on Future Conflict, episode 447. I'm your host, Scott, the proprietor of the Future Conflict channel, and I am joined, as always, by Mr. Joseph Dolio and the Watcher on the Web. Joe, how you doing this morning, brother?
You know what? I'm pretty darn good. It's been a good weekend in excuse me, in Montana. Deer season is wrapping down, but we've had some of the guys staying here at the camp got a couple more deer, so kind of cool. Just been enjoying the Montana weather. Hasn't been too cold. Hasn't been too snowy yet. Just a little, enough to give us a taste of what is to come. I guess we will see.
When's deer season in Montana?
October 26th through December 1st. So it's 5 weeks long. And it's both kinds of deer and elk all during that season.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Well,
I'm not sure if antelope is then too or not, but if there is a large game animal in North America, it exists in Montana.
So. That's facts.
I'll be honest with you. I was rather shocked I saw a moose when I was in Utah on the side of the road, and I was rather shocked how tall those fucking things were.
Oh, yeah, it's a horse with horns. Yeah.
It's taller than a horse.
Yeah.
At least it seemed taller than a horse to me. I mean, I've been around a lot of horses in Kentucky, and it just seemed big.
Yeah,
but it was lanky, though. It wasn't like really thick. Yeah, you're right, Watcher. It kills so many people because cars hit them, right?
Yeah, they're so tall, and the cars are so, like, if it's a car, not a truck or an SUV, but a car, it basically takes the knees out from under them, and then the body falls onto the vehicle, which crushes the occupants.
That's why moose are a decapitation hazard.
To answer Karen O's question, both mule deer and whitetail deer. Mule deer are larger, with bigger ears and smaller tails. So,
how did mule deer taste compared to whitetail?
Same.
About the same.
Yeah.
Alrighty then, guys. How's the world treating you guys? Watcher, I know you're doing hard work on the farm. I guess really the problem.
Hold on. Before we start,
what day of the week it is.
No, it's true. Yeah, I was just say before we start, I do need to take the apology tour and say, hey guys, it was me. It was me this time. It was me all along, Austin. Yeah. Unfortunately, I woke up this morning and just went about my day as though it was a Sunday, which is a work day out here. So I was feeding up stuff to go feed to some sick cows, and suddenly somebody goes, "Aren't you supposed to be doing a show?"
Yeah, well, you made it in time, so no harm, no foul. At around 10, 10 o'clock my time, 10 p.m. my time, I realized that you weren't going to be coming probably at that point, and so I went ahead and made all the stuff and everything, and so I felt bad. We should hopefully we'll have Jim joining us here in a bit. I invited him over because we'll be talking a little bit of China stuff today, and I thought he might have some good insights. We haven't really heard from Jim since the election about China, right? Because the assuming everything goes swimmingly with Trump getting in office, which is not a settled deal yet. We'll have a different calculus with China, so it'll be interesting to get his take on that.
Agreed. The guy who kept us positive for most of the year. It'd be interesting to see what happens now that he's been proven correct, and here he is.
And speak of the devil, and he shall appear. Well, actually, if his device can connect.
Well, you almost said it right. If his Dyson can connect to the show.
I know, right? There he is. Jim, how you doing, brother?
It's calling me a hoover, man. My Dyson can connect.
Oh, it's more of a potato joke. It's fine.
So how's life treating Jim?
Well, after the joke, I have to say it sucks. How's that?
Oh,
No, life
But,
is good. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Good grief! When did the Chinese get a main battle tank?
you know,
I thought they were way behind us on all this stuff.
you know, it's a wish.com battle tank. So
Yeah,
you know.
and those lovely imaging sensors. Where'd
They
get
they don't
those?
even they don't even have cope cages on them, you know, Jim.
Yeah, I know. That's because they haven't had to deal with it. They will.
with a modern battlefield
No,
yet.
they'll buy them by the gross out of North Korea. We know this to be self-evident. So, Joe, how are you? You up in the cold land?
It's actually not cold. I was out with no coat on just a little while ago. It's like 30s, so not too bad.
Excellent, excellent. And Watcher, you're well. How are you?
yeah, doing excellently. Thanks for asking, Jim. Out here, legitimately doing cowboy work, and
Excellent.
honestly, I heard years ago that apparently, like being around large animals does something for guys with PTSD and helps kind of calm the soul. And I thought it was woo-woo bullshit, and by accident, I'm finding out it probably wasn't.
I hate to break
Probably.
it to you, young man, but according to Dolio, you are a large animal.
Oh well, that
True.
is that
This is
is
true.
true.
He is a very large animal.
Yeah, you know the song in Crowder's intro, "You're a Stranger." That it's about me. Anyhow.
Well, I'm
Washer
glad
is
you're enjoying
somewhere
it.
between a Nephilim and a Wendigo. Somewhere.
Uh,
All right, boys. So we're on to China today, huh, Scott?
yeah, so we've got a couple things to talk about before China, but yeah, there's a lot. We haven't really had a chance to really sync up too much since Trump was elected. He hasn't taken office yet, but you got to figure there's a lot of kind of jockeying around with China, leading up to this, some reconfiguring of expectations. So there are a lot of, we've got 5 headlines today we'll be talking about. And all of them kind of hit on different stuff, but a lot of them talk about kind of like, well, what now since this change? So, but before we get into that, let's talk about mysterious drone swarms, shall we, gentlemen? So, Joe, we've talked about this as like one of those real big problems that, that it may not be a serious issue, but it's one of those things that modern militaries have got to get a handle on. When Bubba Joe decides to fly his drone into an Air Force base, I mean, he could essentially destroy one of these planes easily.
Easily, or cause enough damage to render the airfield useless. You don't necessarily have to destroy planes if you can do some sort of damage to the runway, some sort of cratering, or damage one airplane halfway down it, right? But yeah, it is something they definitely have to address. And conventional solutions won't work, right? Wide spectrum jamming across an Air Force base is generally not a good thing. Doesn't allow a lot of other things to happen. So you got to come up with a more physical or kinetic solution.
Well, I mean, I've heard of places potentially putting nets up, which is it seems kind of counterintuitive around an air base. But as long as you've got your approaches and everything uncovered, you could potentially,
But how are you going to make your net?
Right.
And how are you going to
exactly.
have a support network? I mean, that's not a feasible actual solution. It does stop them from landing, but it doesn't stop them from seeing.
Yeah. Let's talk about the story here. Mysterious drone swarms detected over UK air bases hosting U.S. stealth jets. The growing presence of mysterious drone swarms at or near U.S. military bases has become a significant cause for concern. Reports suggest these unmanned aerial systems have now been spotted over British military installations. The Guardian reports that a drone swarm had been spotted over 3 UK bases, Lakenheath, Midenhall, and in Suffolk and Fetweld in Norfolk between last Wednesday and Friday. The 48th Fighter Wing is stationed at RAF Leakenhouse. This base is home to only F-15 wing in Europe, which includes 2 F-15E Strike Eagle squadrons and 2 F-35 Lightning II squadrons. So this is that's a lot of expensive stuff there. And this isn't like Bubba Joe flying his drone into the base, just wants to I want to see what they're doing. No, this is actual like planned and coordinated activities.
Yes, I mean, I don't know how we know who it is though who's doing it. That's the problem.
Yeah,
I don't know how you resolve that, other than, as I point out all the time, following the drones to their landing point and figuring it out from there. This is a good job for counterintelligence.
I was just going to say, given our propensity for disunity of command, perhaps it's just a bunch of guys running a red team out of St. Louis. But
right,
it also could be somebody who means us harm and is running early tests. I mean, we've had 2 events with devices that caused problems, one at our embassy, one at an airfield, right? So they shut an airport down based on a device, supposedly a breach. Again, you don't get any details. So it's a busy time over there. Somebody's running against us. We've had fiber optic cables cut by a Chinese vessel again in the Baltic. So this is a push everywhere kind of event. We've talked about that. It's everywhere all the time, right? And it'll just keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. That's just how it plays out.
Weirdly, first responder just said something that makes me wonder if that might actually be a feasible solution. Like drones fly, like the drones we're talking about fly short enough. If you had an anti-aircraft mortar round that exploded in the air pointed downwards.
If you had a reliable fusing situation so that they didn't come downwards.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's that.
So what we're going to end up with here is everybody's moving to unmanned aerial systems that don't radiate at all and have no direct control. So they have onboard capability to go where they need to go. But they're not vulnerable to the electromagnetic spectrum attacks that the early ones are. So you can't take them down like the old DJIs, right? So
I
get the feeling we're just screwed because if you can put a lot of those in the air, you basically have to disrupt the way their motors run, and you have to disrupt the way their processors run, and you have to disrupt all the sensors they have. And we've had the discussion about cheap toy manufacturing costs in China. China can produce these things at a hundredth of the cost that we have to pay.
They can, and they can do it by the hundreds of thousands.
Exactly. And so we're at a real competitive disadvantage in this arena. We're spending an immense amount of time and effort on catching up. But every time we catch up, we're going to have to figure out a way to defend against what we learn, right? And generationally, we have to stay ahead of it. So assuming that remember those ray guns they had a couple of years ago that would take a drone out of the sky?
Yeah,
that's not. Yeah,
but only if you're close enough, and only if it's using the spectrum that you're denying it by overloading it, right?
Yeah, and only if it's actively being controlled by a pilot on the ground. I think I said this in the early parts of the war. I thought, and I said pretty explicitly, I'll have to dig up the clip, that the Ukraine war will cause, and the way that drones are being used will cause AI, particularly AI in charge of deadly weapons, to be advanced, and
it doesn't
become
have to
accepted
be,
on
and
the
it
world
doesn't have
stage.
to be that advanced of an AI, right? We're just
right.
talking about we're talking about a very large if-then matrix, right? If you see this image, then do this. If you see
it's basically the same level of computer intelligence that you have on a Javelin missile, right?
Pretty much.
Well, that's why it's fire and forget.
Well, the Javelin the Javelin doesn't make the decision to engage a target. This does.
No. What I'm saying is, once you fire the Javelin, it has the ability to, and if the target that it originally locks in on goes away, then it will reacquire something similar in the general vicinity.
Scott, are you saying that it has the ability to discern?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's looking for a similar type of signature, right? It's been programmed with what a target should look like generally. And real quick, I wanted to recognize Hunch has blessed us this morning, gifting 10 Future Conflict memberships over there on YouTube. Thank you very much, Hunch. I really appreciate that. That's a very generous donation. So if you're one of the guys who or gals that benefited from it, so say thank you to Hunch. And then he, generously realized that he had to renew his own membership, and then promptly did that. So very, very good.
I think that the Terminator said it best when he said, I need a plasma rifle in the 40-watt range. Yeah. That would probably solve the drone problem.
Well, right. I think ultimately that's going to be the killer app, right? When we finally get directed energy weapons to the point where, they can shoot out to about a mile, with millimeter wave radar, so that it can handle small item target acquisition. Ultimately, though, we're still several years away from a widespread system. I know the Marines, Joe, actually are I think leading the pack right now with directed energy weapons on mobile platforms.
They also were the first ones to put in one of their manuals, the Marine Rifle Squad manual, anti-drone light infantry tactics. So
yeah. Well, one of the things I saw in a clip out of these were Russian guys. They were sporting long barrel what's the AK shotgun? AK-12.
The Sega.
Yeah, Saiga. Anyway, I don't know what the military designation for it is, but they were basically Saiga shotguns with 30-round magazines and long barrels. And they were basically, those guys were being used as drone
magazines. They're 10, but yes.
Well, no, these weren't like the ones that are like this long. It was like inordinately long, right? I think it was anyway. The point is that they were ready, with shotguns to go after drones. So I think there's some realization that you got to be proactive about this.
You watch the video of these little personalized drones with the 30mm golden BBs chasing these guys around the battlefield. What they need is a shotgun. But the problem is, if you're 15 yards away from a 30mm warhead going off, it'll mess you up, and then they'll get you with the next one because it'll knock you on the ground.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. There's gonna be so many of these things. In the world of there's one and it's watching us and it's targeting us. To there are 100, and you might be able to get 2, 3 before another one's on you.
I've got a good video.
It's terrifying. It's like murder hornets, man. It's like murder hornets.
Well, and I guess birdshot is what you use. You'd have to, in order to get your best chances to get hits, right?
Yeah. Well,
flechettes.
Yeah, I just don't have a whole lot of experience with that kind of stuff to know
Here we go.
What's the right answer? Oh yeah, these are those swarming smart drones.
Well,
yep.
They're aware, right? Their sensors allow them to sense.
Yeah,
they have an algorithm built in. So imagine that on steroids.
Yeah.
So even though you don't know what's in the room, you fly that in the room, it'll learn what's in the room, right?
And ironically, you may be able to get rid of all these, but that would be great for just for reconnaissance alone, right, Joe? That would if you just had those to map the woods in front of, say, like an infantry company or something like that.
Yeah. It'd be a solid tool.
Well, you send it forward, and then you hope it comes back. If it comes back, you then plug it into something again that's shielded and doesn't radiate, and you see where it went, what it saw, and then you can send another one back to perhaps attrit itself and blow itself up in favor of destroying a target. And that seems to be the way it's going.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on? We didn't mean the point was not to talk about the future of drone warfare. The point is just to remind you guys out there that this is not just something that they're dealing with on the battlefields of Ukraine, right? This is something that the U.S. Air Force is dealing with, literally at all three of the main bases there in England. Yes, it is true. A little T-Pain action there in the Rumble chat. Good
Hey,
morning,
my man
brother.
bought me a package of Peak biscuits and gravy just when my supply
Ooh.
was getting low. So
That's a man right there.
yeah. That's a true homie.
Yeah. All right, guys. Let's jump into our next one here. Now, Joe, this is one thing that we've been talking about for a while, so it's kind of nice to see some reporting on it. Terror to the south, Hezbollah in Latin America. Joe, just kind of, this is not something new. This is something that we've
Right.
been
If
talking
people
about
are
for a while.
surprised by this, they have never watched our show before. Yeah.
This is originally from Real Clear Defense. Says the re-election of Donald Trump has sent ripples across terror supporting an anti-Israel regime. In the Middle East, Qatar claimed it would rescind its longtime asylum for Hamas leaders. In Iran is reportedly recalibrating its retaliation for Israel's recent strikes. But the new Trump administration should be focusing on Latin America. This is true because of the Monroe Doctrine, where complicit nations have enabled Hezbollah to thrive. The U.S. must curtail Hezbollah's active regional fundraising, which not only supports attacks against Israel, but transnational criminal activity. Joe, I want to open the floor up to you. I mean, you're the one that I know of that's probably been sounding the alarm on this as long as anybody. What's your kind of initial take on this?
So, first of all, let's remember that the largest terror attack committed in South America was by Hezbollah in Buenos Aires, and it was a long time ago. So they still have the capability of doing that anywhere in South America if they wish. There is a string of towns that are 90 to 95% Muslim, beginning in the tri-border area and working its way due north, all the way up into northern Mexico. If you wonder what that's for, then you haven't been paying attention. It is a rat line to bring people into the U.S. They have trading centers, quite famously, in Venezuela. And there are all kinds of terror activities and training and recruitment centers throughout South America. They've had a really big handle on there, particularly Hezbollah, where they've gotten some folks like Mr. Tarek, who is the security minister and oil minister in Venezuela, into some key places. And I might also remind everyone that I know everyone likes our favorite strongman in El Salvador, but his father was a Hezbollah follower. Let's just say he was an imam for some Hezbollah characters. So
For real? I had no idea. Holy shit.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's why I haven't been as much of a fan of him as everyone else. So anyway, they've got their hooks in, and they're going to continue. So,
yeah. So I mean, if you just kind of look at the countries down there, some of the usual suspects pop up. So the socialist president of Bolivia, and of course our favorite authoritarian dictator in Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. Both of them have made really anti-Semitic comments, but they've also completely severed ties with Israel. Maduro mourned the death of terrorists and Hezbollah founding member Hassan Nasrallah and expressed support for the terror group while condemning Israel. So, I mean, he's clearly putting himself on the map as a bad guy. Now, Jim, I mean, this is one of those kind of complexities of South America. What's your kind of take on it, and how do you think the Trump factor is going to make a difference?
Well, I think they are. I think the leadership is now aware that Trump's back, right? So they're all racing around trying to secure alternative relationships. But I think we're going to have a problem with Venezuelan oil. I think we're going to have access to more petroleum down in that corner of the world than we know what to do with. So from Guyana north, excluding Venezuela, I think you're going to see a lot of exploitation, and that's a positive thing. But it won't fall under these leftist regimes. We watched what happened in Peru. So what Peru allows is a massive Chinese penetration of the logistics chain in South America, which works with people like Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and the other groups out of the Middle East with abandon, right? And if you're into the narco world, then you've got the whole money laundering scheme and all that. You now have a waste gate for all of the overpressure of illegal money or black money that'll go out through the Peruvian port to China. So you can take non-dollar value and you can swap it for Chinese goods and then sell them in South America. And there's a discounted mechanism in that, which is narcotics money. You used to have to put up half of it to launder it. Now you may have to put up 10 or 20% to launder it. So the efficiencies for these illegal entities, these transnational criminal entities, and these terrorist groups is going to be very high.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing that I haven't really kind of considered too much with the Belt and Road stuff. That is literally the perfect mechanism to wash drug money into legitimate businesses.
But it's not drug. It's not drug money. It's monies that come from the strategies to disable and engage your enemy in this new hybrid warfare world, right?
Yeah.
And so, unlike the United States, where we turn on ourselves and self-correct, right? We have commissions, and we go after people like Ollie North for buying and selling this and doing this for the national interest. These guys don't do that. What they do is they go out and execute this stuff for 20 or 30 years. And there's a reason. I mean, there's a reason that Hezbollah and Iran are in Venezuela, and there's a reason that China's in Venezuela and China's in Peru, and there's a reason why Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad and the Palestinian movement, even proto this period of time, so the PLO, it's the reason they were in Paraguay, right?
Yeah.
It's because there was an incredible border opportunity for black market activity in and out of Brazil and in and out of Argentina. And they control the towns, still to this day, right? And I think, as Joe said, they're responsible for the largest terrorist attack in Latin America. People forget that. So we're still up against that. And at the root of it is China gravity and China money and China commerce and China's ability to create its own economy. And people poo-poo that, and they say, oh, China's about to come apart. The yuan's about to come apart. The ruble's about to come apart. They don't care, right? And we've watched that in Venezuela. Everybody's like, well, Maduro's going to collapse. He's going to collapse. He's going to collapse. As you collapse one of these countries, all they do is squeeze their people harder. That's why we've got so many Venezuelans here in the United States. The outcome is less akin to, let's say, Brazil at this point, and it's more akin to North Korea. Venezuela will keep approaching North Korea before the guys in power there give up power over Venezuela, right? Because there's nowhere for them to go. And it just degrades and degrades and degrades. And that's bad for us because it's proximate to our country. And the damage is already done. We have a couple of million Venezuelan illegals that have entered the country in the last 24 to 36 months. And we're going to have to figure out how to reconcile that. It's an incredibly difficult thing for the Trump administration because China is behind it. And forces that are understood have been allowed to do this. And we haven't even touched on the Mexican cartels.
Yeah. Let me dive a little deeper into this story here. So in the early 90s, Hezbollah bombed the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires. And 2 years later, the Association Mutual Israeli-Argentina Jewish Cultural Center in November of 2023, police in Brazil foiled plans for a major terrorist attack on multiple Jewish targets in the country, home of Latin America's second largest Jewish population. Hezbollah patron, the Islamic Republic of Iran, facilitates Hezbollah's presence in Latin America by building advantageous relationships with authoritarian-leaning countries. And I think absolutely, if Iran is involved in something anywhere in the world, China is not far behind. I wouldn't be surprised, really, if China wasn't, kind of bankrolling a lot of this stuff as kind of unrelated actors that they can rely on in the region. All right, here. Bolivia and Venezuela are rich with uranium and other resources. Iran helped Venezuelan engineers with geophysical aerial probes and geochemical analysis to find uranium deposits. That's kind of concerning, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely.
By contrast, while the presence of Ukrainian deposits is known in Bolivia, the government has labeled information on the topic as reserved, meaning the location, size, and potential mining are not publicly disclosed. I wonder why. Venezuela and Bolivia are supplying Iran with uranium for its nuclear program. In fact, in late October 2024, Bolivia produced its first nuclear fuel for a research reactor. And then on top of that, both of these countries have narco trafficking markets in which Hezbollah and other terrorist groups are involved. Historically, Bolivia is one of the world's largest producers of coca leaves due to its abundance. Bolivia naturally played a large role in the Latin American drug trade. According to a 2022 White House press release, Bolivia's steadily growing cocaine production poses a public health threat to the United States. You don't say.
You don't say.
Yeah, right. And of course, you can't talk about this part of the world without talking about the FARC, a known Hezbollah ally. Venezuela serves as a main export hub for cocaine to the U.S. and Europe. Early in the Biden administration, the U.S. Justice Department announced several narco-terrorism indictments against the Maduro regime, including Nicolas Maduro himself. Yeah, this is always interesting, Joe, when you see names like this. A Venezuelan Syrian politician, Adel El Zabaria, was indicted in the Justice Department for conspiring with Maduro and other leaders. And that guy's one we've heard about, and we've talked about him in the past. But it's just always funny when you see these. They're so ingrained in these societies already that they are in prominent positions of power. So it's not like they're just kind of like a really small minority. It's like you mentioned, there are like majority Muslim areas in some of these regions.
Yeah, there are throughout Central America, but yes.
Right, and we've seen a lot of people just spoiling for a fight with the Mexican cartels. Jim, we've talked about this in the past. Make Sicario not fiction. That type of thing. But ultimately, if you can't kind of go into that whole thing unless you kind of go all the way down to the bottom of the rabbit hole. And at the bottom of the rabbit hole, you're going to find Hezbollah, you're going to find China, and you're going to find a lot of other countries that are much more expansive than a list than just Mexico, which is where, Joe, we've talked about the idea of creating a buffer zone in northern Mexico and going, designating narco organizations as terrorists and going after them the same way we went after the Taliban. Yeah, that briefs well, but ultimately, like I said, if you go down that rabbit hole, eventually you're going to run into a lot of more complex problem sets.
The thing that I always see at the end of that rabbit hole, Scott, is that it comes down to you have to stop inbound cargo and stop outbound cargo, because that's how money changes hands, right? So you have drug precursors. And then you have buckets and buckets of American dollars that end up in Mexico. And you've seen some of the raids they've done on some of the apartments in Mexico City, where it's ceiling to floor dollar bills in bundles or other currencies. And that has to be converted into something and gotten out of the country. And that's done through buying goods and swapping them out, assuming they could buy goods and then fulfill into the U.S. market. So imagine that. So all these maquilas started up that would pack and ship, right? So imagine all the China direct merchandise for the Chinese-based retailers. Everything ordered would hub through Mexico, and they turn that into legitimate dollars, right? The difficulty we have with stopping that is you've got to interdict shipments. And if you interdict shipments, you're falling right into the South China Sea trap, which is, well, China will do that to us, or China will do that to Taiwan because we are breaking their law, right? What have they done the last 6 months in the South China Sea? They've been pushing this. This is ours. This is our authority. We own it. We own it. We're going to apply our law here. The second we start playing on maritime law, they're going to interpret their own maritime law, and that will impact Taiwan, and that'll impact Southeast Asia and North Asia.
Right.
And so you get these guys that sit around in Foggy Bottom, and they're sitting there dithering about this because they know this risk exists. Everybody wants to solve the problem around fentanyl in Mexico. But if we do what we did in the 1800s and we set out to stop these, quote, pirates, the Chinese will be in a position to do the same thing. And when I say the Chinese, the Communist Party and the PLA, and they'll begin to execute the same kind of stop and inspects on us and on our allies. And guess what? Munitions are moving, and things the Chinese feel are illegal are moving. And they'll set the rules the way they want. And the harder we push, the more they'll get aggressive about setting their own rule set.
Well, I guess at the bottom of that rabbit hole ultimately is China, right? I mean, because they are literally involved at some level in every bit of the bad actions that are occurring in South America. And they are ultimately, China's involvement is literally almost the perfect example of what we were trying to avoid with the Monroe Doctrine, like other countries having, major stakes and things like that within the Western Hemisphere. And we're going to talk about China here in a minute, so I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but ultimately, biscuits and gravy too, sure. But that's beside the point. So I just think this is one of those kind of like, you guys have heard the term wicked problems, right? It's like, it's great to kind of rail at and to talk about and to be, excited about, but ultimately there are no easy answers with this. And, it's going to take a lot of work. All right. Anything else you guys want to talk about related to Islamic terrorists in South America, specifically Hezbollah or any other ones? At least, Joe, I haven't seen any ISIS in South America. I can at least say,
I would disagree.
You think there's been ISIS in South America?
Yes, I would actually be shocked if there was not.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you mean like by passing through South America, or do you mean based out of South America?
I mean passing through.
Yeah, okay. I would agree with that,
So
right?
just imagine the bar scene on Tatooine, okay? It's all there. And it's all there because you have all the precursors to allow that black, dark, gray side of an economy to operate, right? And it's all about moving goods and moving money.
Yeah. On that cheery note, let's continue talking about Iran a little more. Iran announces expanded nuclear enrichment after IAEA rebuke. So in a 9-3 vote with 12 abstentions, well, that's kind of crazy. The IAEA agreed to rebuke Iran for the lack of cooperation. The vote was driven by the U.S., UK, and their allies. Russia and China both voted against the resolution, along with Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso. The timing of the decision was particularly unfortunate, coming just days after the IAEA chief Rafael Grossi's visit to Iran, during which Iran agreed to measures designed to keep their stockpile of highly enriched uranium from growing. Iran has promised to ensure that its highest enrichment levels remain below 60%. Or below, which is below the 90% level needed to make weapons, and to ensure that it's all that raised hope amongst officials of actually investing in safeguard efforts. The U.S.-led effort for censure, it seems, as always, to underscore that Iran cannot take any steps that would satisfy them. Angered by the IAEA rebuke, Iran is promising a response. I mean, not good, right, guys? I mean, Jim, we've been dealing with Iran quite a bit here lately. Iran's got a lot of other irons in the fire. So, do you think between them kind of helping out Russia and recruiting Houthis and fighting Israel, you think they got a whole lot of bandwidth to really expand their nuclear program?
No, but they have a hell of a lot of material. And, the kind of sleeper in this world is that Pakistan has weapons. And my guess is that there's probably some level of agreement on those, and it probably has a price tag on it. And the Chinese have weapons. And I can think the North Koreans probably have weapons, given that they've been working with the Pakistanis and the Iranians and the Chinese.
Well, in the media, they've been saying that there's a high likelihood of a North Korean underground test here in the near future.
Wouldn't shock me in the least. And I'm sure there'll be a bunch of Iranian scientists standing around as that event occurs. So, the difficulty is everybody now wants nuclear weapons. I mean, there's been a discussion about the fact that Ukraine should have nuclear weapons. Saudi Arabia wants nuclear weapons. You just go down the list. Japan is probably thinking about them. Korea is probably thinking about them. If I was the Taiwanese, I would have thought about it, right? So what we've had in the last 4 years is just a complete and utter failure of policy. And this goes back to Team America making fun of Hans Blix. We've embraced the multilateral organization ability to manage this kind of crisis, and at some point you have to go kinetic like the Israelis did. And if you notice, since then, that's really quieted everything down. But it hasn't quieted down what's going on in the background. And we're seeing that with the North Korean troops in Europe. We're seeing that with the Iranians still using the Houthis, and the ineptitude of the American response. So we have an issue that's going to have to be dealt with by Trump administration. I think they'll be better able to deal with it, and I don't think it'll all require kinetic force, as everybody is screaming. It's just going to require a strategy instead of the alternative to a strategy that we've been dealing with for the last 4 years.
Well, speaking of those Pakistani nukes, I mean, clearly those were originally designed to counterbalance against India. But, with Saudi Arabia having a call option on those nukes, considering they're probably the ones that paid for them, I wonder, the complexities around that, with Iran kind of being a spoiler right between those two countries. And I think you're right. I think their bandwidth is not very high, but they're definitely involved they're involved in Russia, and their cooperation with Russia I assume would potentially attract some technological transfer for their nuclear weapons program from Russia. I think you're also right that when the isotopes start spinning in North Korea, I think we'll have Iranian monitors there taking notes. So, I mean, they're clearly involved. They're clearly interested, but at the same time, I mean, they've got a lot of irons in the fire, and I just don't know that they can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time.
Yeah,
I don't think they really have to. I think that just as Jim pointed out, they've got a lot of friends, and they've got a lot of help that can come in. It's way easier to just buy the material than it is to make it yourself. And there are plenty of actors right now with tensions the way they are who'd probably be willing to sell them some.
Well, one of the things you have to keep in mind, Derna's been running a stream in the background about, the Sunni and the Shia gap and how things work. And what it comes down to is you've got layers in this. It isn't all about belief structure. It isn't all about religion. It's about money and power. And the money and power threads run concurrently with the kind of 12er mentality and hum with Pakistan, if you notice, they've got groups in the street now trying to get the old prime minister back. So there's disharmony in all these places, but they have the ability to just shut it down, right? And they've proven in the past that they will. And they all have in common that they have that central military force, whether it's IRGC, Basij, or whether it's the ISI. They can crack down on the whole country overnight, and they've been proven to be able to do it effectively. The money must flow. This is it's kind of like Dune, right? The money must flow, the spice must flow. These guys will keep it alive down to the last tenth because it's all they've got. And the one thing that I haven't heard a lot of discussion about is when you get uranium as pure as they have, you don't even need to blow it up. You just need to sprinkle it on a street in a major city. And that city is going to not be able to function, right? The concept, you don't even need to make a dirty bomb. Just getting this visible material in places where it doesn't belong, the second it tests, Western society locks up, right? So you put little bits of this in various cities around the world, you'll cause chaos. And the world knows that. That's why they're so afraid of this.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else you guys think we should talk about with this? Let me go down. There we go. This Iran View. This is a tweet from Iran View 24, which I assume is an Iranian media organization. The deputy of Iran's AEO provided more details about Iran's response to the resolution of the Board of Governors of the IAEA. According to this report, Iran has launched a series of new and advancing centrifuges, increasing the capacity level and speed of enrichment. I would absolutely could see a world where Iran becomes basically the local supplier for a lot of these countries that already have the nuke program. Kind of like what you were saying, Joe. It doesn't matter if you can do it if you got the friends that can do it for you.
Well, I mean, but don't worry though, Scott. Look at the very last line here. The U.S. intelligence community has repeatedly confirmed that Iran has not decided to make a nuclear weapon. Has decided not to make a nuclear weapon. Gee, you mean the intelligence community that is fully subverted and has been proven to be sending like interns within it or influencing decisions and sending top secret information back to Iran? Gee, weird.
Yeah, I mean, if U.S. intelligence says it, especially under this current regime, I basically it's like inverse Kramer for me when it comes to information. I just assume it's the opposite. All right. Yeah, this is just one of those tough ones. I mean, Iran's going to get a nuke when they want to get a nuke. Ultimately, that's the only thing. It's the only thing that's keeping Iran from having one is the fact that Iran thinks, for whatever reason, it's the life is better for it if they don't have one. All right. Final thoughts on this one, guys.
Yeah, before we move on,
Watcher.
let this just. I mean, shit. I hate to be the guy doing meme quotes, but let this be a lesson in the laws of messing with the laws of Mother Nature. And I mean this very sincerely, because in so many avenues, the elites thought, we can control people's ability to produce what they want and knowledge and all these types of things, when this was never going to happen. At best, we were going to slow down who got the nukes and when. But it's exactly like the climate people trying to pay these smaller nations not to basically to commit economic suicide and not produce factories and be able to sustain themselves. It'll work for a short period of time, and then everybody's gonna tell you to go fuck yourself, and generally all at once. Gee, it's almost like that exact thing is happening to our highest order technology that we've tried to suppress worldwide for what is it now? Since World War II, so 70 years.
Yeah. All right. Joe, Jim, any more thoughts on this before we move on?
No, just the problem with processing facilities is when you take out a processing facility, you very often put up a giant plume of yellow dust that moves with the air. If you do it with one of those wonderful deep penetrating rounds, or many of them, uh, that all moves somewhere. And if it moves the wrong place, you end up with a lot of unhappy people. So I don't think we want to make everybody unhappy. So it's one of those things of, oh, please don't go drop those on nuclear sites.
Hey, hey, Joe.
Yes.
Hey, check out that link I just dropped in the private chat.
Yeah, first, let me address something in the chat. New York Times saying that Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken at the fall of the Soviet Union. Biden can't return them because we don't have them. The Russians have them.
The Russians have those because those were Russian-designed weapons, and we basically, if I remember correctly, we disabled them first and then turned them over. Or did we ever even have them? And did the Russians just take possession of them? I don't know.
On that link, I know that guy. If you need anything, so
yeah, I'm definitely looking. There's some stuff tickling my fancy.
The Red Dawn stuff he has is really cool. By the way,
I know it's really cool.
Now that I said that, Hawkeye will be popping up, or Alpha Charlie Concepts will be popping up in the chat too, because he knows them too.
We are at our shameless sponsorship section of the show where we talk about tactical-wisdom.com. You know what, Joe? I think it's only fair that we share with the chat what we're talking about here, because there's a visual aspect to this that will work for YouTube.
Absolutely. It's a good local, a good homie, 0241 Tactical. They are making a move from Montana to Florida because they don't have any brains, I guess. We should, they want to move down there, whatever. But they make some great stuff. A lot of the unique uniforms that I have, like that jacket I have that is World War II frog skin, they made. They also made my helmet cover and a few other things. So good people.
Yeah, so this pattern that we're showing off here is the Red Dawn pattern. This is the kind of fake Russian camo that was made for the movie Red Dawn. And it's cool enough to where it deserves its own run, I guess. And so there they are. Alpha Charlie Concepts in the chat says, "You called?" Yeah, we're just talking about
talking about 241 Tactical, so that would definitely bring you out.
He says here, night desert and T-block. I'm gonna have to open the page. I'll open the website here. Let's see what we can see here. Oh, it's all there. Yeah, Joe, I'll share this now too. I'm just sharing their website now, and we can
they also
prattle on about this for a second.
They also make my pack covers that I have. They took like old Marine Corps tarps and turned them into pack covers, and man, are they great!
Oh my God, I didn't realize I needed something until I just saw the Splinter camo ballistic helmet cover. the boonie hat there, Splinter.
Yeah.
Is this?
I've got a. They're making me. What did I order? Oh, Pencott Devil Dog helmet cover. So it's going to be pretty sweet. A lot of their stuff is made to order. Real good guys. They'll make pretty much anything you ask, especially if it's funny. So.
Mitchell Leaf. Mitchell Leaf, is that Vietnam pattern, right? That was like before the.
Mitchell Leaf had the oak trees on it, and it's just before we did the EDRL or whatever.
Yeah. Fertile or whatever. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Let's see, pre-order page. Let's see, what has he got? Oh, so they're doing all these patterns. Oh my God, this full uniform sets.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so they're probably going to get some pre-orders from me.
Yeah.
They actually make one that's really cool called Marpat Tiger Stripe, where they take the Marpat colorway and make it Tiger Stripe. It's really cool. And I've been waiting for them to make another run of it. So Alpha Charlie, if you could,
It looks like they got the was it the frog
Yeah, I've got that shirt right there. Oh, they have it in the other color.
yeah, they got it in the
Oh,
desert
I've got it in
one
the green.
and then
The green side. Now I need the jungle side.
they got tiger stripe, T block. There's that splinter.
Okay, so you're totally derailing the show here, by the way.
I am. I apologize. I apologize. I mean, we actually finished the odds and ends quicker than normal, so I figured I had a couple minutes to burn on this. All right, I will stop sharing this, and I will put this aside for my own private viewing later. T block, yeah, T block. I'll be honest with you. I have a T block camo smock from Krushiki, and I wore the hell out of that thing in Turkey, man. People looked at me like I was crazy, but you know.
What I've got a new set from the boys over at Fire Force who do all the Rhodesian stuff.
Oh, that's right. They do that Rhodesian
stuff. Barn stuff. That's pretty legit.
So speaking of which, what you write? What are you writing about this week on tacticalwisdom.com?
Maybe the death of tactical wisdom. I really don't know.
Oh, come now.
We got no. You don't get to tell me that. We're totally changing things up. We will see. Let me just say, to be continued. But in the meantime, tell your friends to buy some books, right? So,
when you say multi-tarn, which one is that?
It's an actual pattern called multi-tarn.
I know, but what's it close to? I'm just trying to remember. I've heard the name before.
Strict tarn and fleck tarn kind of mixed together.
Okay. I think I know it. Well, all right. Well, it's okay. No. I just Googled it and I just found it. Yeah, that's a pretty good one too. Is that Danish? Is that who uses that, or is something? It's not.
I don't know that anyone does, but maybe I don't know.
I'm pretty sure I saw somebody in Turkey wearing that, but I couldn't remember who though. All right, let's jump right in then to our section on China. The funny thing is, Jim, when we normally talk about China, it's like one through line, like it's a hot week in the South China Sea, or it's exercises in and around Taiwan, or it's China's doing this or China's doing that. But this week, it's like China's doing a lot. And so we've got 5 stories about 5 kind of aspects of things that China is doing that I think all of them kind of should make us aware and make us, worried about their place in the world. Just to kind of put it out there, I don't worry about Russia because outside of Russia's nuclear weapons, they generally aren't a threat to the U.S. and they don't have any kind of existential kind of threat to anything that we are really involved in. Same with any country in the Middle East. It's not one country there. It's kind of more the things that the region could potentially affect with us as far as energy. We don't get a whole lot of our oil from there, but at the same time, we do. A lot of the world gets their petroleum from that region. So, shocks to the system in the Middle East can affect us. And then I think that the Western Hemisphere is important. And then, of course, China, because China is the only country in the world that could potentially go toe-to-toe with us in the long term. So I think it's important for us to keep our eye on China. So that's kind of where I'm coming at this from with these stories. So the first headline is China is armed and ready for trade war 2.0 with Donald Trump. Now, Jim, I know you've been following, the potential Trump policies pretty heavily. You're very well versed in how they kind of did things the last go around. He's been really kind of talking up the tariffs. How worried is China of the tariffs aspect and essentially that trade war, kind of resuming.
They're obviously very concerned, and with reason. There's a tariff regimen on them now. Biden hasn't freed it up.
Yeah.
While you hear the shrill sound of the leftists about tariffs are going to destroy the global economy, you have to understand tariffs as a tool. The use of countervailing tariffs is actually very common. So China doesn't let us import certain things. We shouldn't let them import certain things. But we have such a strong block in industry here that relies on China for pretty much everything. The good thing about Trump is he finally had the chutzpah to say, hey, we can't do that anymore. We have to have domestic alternatives. The difficulty was that when Biden won, they started talking about things like domestic substitution and domestic industry, but then they cut the legs out of the energy trade. So what happened is nothing. So there's been no improvement as Biden's been sitting in office. And so Trump's going to come back in and start over, but the Chinese know what that looks like. So what they're doing is trying to set up bilateral relationships with as many people as they can to undermine the impact of the U.S. tariffs. But at the end of the day, if you can't get a Chinese-made item into the U.S. without a tariff, that's okay. Now, everybody out there is screaming, hey, but we don't have alternatives. Well, guess what? That's all right. We'll figure that out because it's not going to be critical stuff. On the critical stuff, we've made exemptions. Now, the problem is the Chinese are playing the other side of that coin or the other side of that knife. They're saying to us, we won't export this stuff. So things like rare earth magnets, things like specialized metals, things like powder, things like rare chemicals that you use for very strange reasons, certain types of gases for industrial processes in healthcare, pharmaceuticals, because we let all of our pharmaceutical companies put all the production over there. Unwrapping this is going to be hard, but it has to be done. And then overlay on this the whole global carbon trading regime and COP event in Baku this week. They are complicating it as much as possible. So the way you play this game on a global level is what Donald Trump is doing. You say, these are my tools. I don't want to have to use them against you, but as you know, I'm willing to. And what we have to do is understand that the Democrats are going to attack his use of these tools because they want status quo and they're getting money from people who want status quo. It's going to get to be really complicated and it's going to move very quickly because Trump knows in the last chance he had to do this kind of macroeconomic shift with China that they held him back. We've got to do it this time. People talk about the semiconductor investments that Biden made.
Yeah.
Biden-Harris gave money into a program Trump put forward. They delayed it until they got in because they wanted to control the largesse. So you got to keep in mind that the U.S. is its own worst enemy in these trade discussions, but the people Trump is bringing to the table will be very effective. And this will not be a blunt object. It's going to be very, very surgical how they do this. So let's watch and learn.
Yeah, no, I think I'm optimistic, but at the same time, I mean, when you're coming up with a plan, the enemy always gets a vote. So it's important for us to keep that in mind. So I mean, the interesting thing is that China. Go ahead.
If possible, I'd like to just back up something that old Hong Kong just said, which is it's one thing that we subsidize the goods, and I heavy air quotes on goods that China sends over to us. It's another thing entirely, right? Like, forget not putting a tariff on stuff. How about we stop paying for Chinese companies to be able to ship anything they want to America for free? Like, absolutely free. They pay nothing.
So what Watcher's talking about is the fact that the government in China refunds a certain percent of the cost of export, and there are tax offsets available to the China manufacturers that mean that the China-run shipping companies are paid by the government to operate, and so there's an offset.
Mhm.
That's been going on for a long time. They keep changing the rules, and it gets harder and harder. Used to be that the exporter could keep that 10% value-added tax refund or whatever they wanted to call it in offshore, but then the PRC got very upset because people were getting wealthy on the offset. They were dumping product at very low prices to get the 10% offset that they could put in a foreign bank. So those days are done, but that same system of subsidy occurs within the state-owned enterprises. And so when heavy equipment arrives in Latin America, it is very, very low cost. So think of Chinese vehicles, Chinese electric vehicles, Chinese heavy trucks, Chinese heavy equipment that would compete with people like Caterpillar or Komatsu or the other production people.
As well as that's also true. But I was also talking about the here what Griswold's saying. The Global Postal Union also heavily subsidizes shipping out of China because they're considered a quote developing nation.
Yeah, and that's kind of what all those retailers we were talking about earlier, Shine et al. That's the game that's being played there. It's cheaper to ship out of China, drop ship out of China, than it is to drop ship out of the United States. Explain to me why? Because you've got this archaic developing world WTO nonsense that occurs, and it's why Trump doesn't trust multilateral organizations. It's because they've sold us out for 30 years. And the rules under which China got these exceptions should have changed a long time ago, but nobody had the guts to do it, right? So we'll see where it goes.
Well, the interesting thing, I mean, so this article kind of does a good job of positioning China as to where they are today versus where they were back, during the what was it, 2018 was really the hot and heavy period of time between Trump and China. So like, for instance, back then, the Chinese economy was pretty robust, but now it's facing some challenges. I mean, these are things that we've seen China go through. Now, we're not worried about collapse like some people are, but they've clearly had property issues with the real estate market. They've got some, debt, deflation. These are problems that China has now in 2024 that they didn't have in 2018, or if they did, they weren't as big a thing, right? And so I think that they've also been kind of preparing through that diversification, like you mentioned, Jim, that they have looked for other new markets, right? I mean, hell, they're not even the largest exporter. The country, what is it? Mexico surpasses China as the top exporter to the U.S. now, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. So,
or is it Chinese stuff going into Mexico? And
no,
then
it's all stuff, but it's also petroleum and ag and other things. There's a distortion because there's a tariff advantage to Mexico because of the North American zone, right?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of pressure on Mexico of late because the PRC has moved assembly into the Maquila zone. And again, this is subsidized by the narcotraficantes, right? So it's got the same hair on it. So there's, in the last 6 months during the election, there's been large firms are backing away from northern Mexico maquilas because they see that there's going to be a problem. And the problem will be Chinese goods being washed in Mexico and then dumped into the U.S. market. So there'll be transshipment problems and country of origin problems. And the same can be said for Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Laos, Pakistan. All, when you go look at stuff now, that's where it's coming from. But what it's really doing is it's being rebadged in many cases. And so country of origin laws, I think the Department of Commerce is going to crack down on that. So Customs will crack down on that. But Mexico's losing its allure because we're onto the game. And that is not the same as domestic manufacturing. Canada, on the other hand, needs to be pulled much closer to the United States because they do things we don't do. And in the past, we've done some goofy stuff with the Canadians on dimensional hardwood, dimensional softwood. But from a standpoint of their mining and value-added capacity and their potential as an ally, Canada has a very, very high potential to be a close ally under the Trump administration, and I hope they get that right day one.
Me too. It would save us having to conquer them the traditional way.
I mean, do we need to get
you large Nephilims in the east, in the west?
I just wonder if we don't need to do a Maidan 2.0 on Ottawa.
No, see, I want the rest of the country. They can keep Ottawa and basically right up till the Frenchies.
I honestly think
Canada will be self-correcting. Yeah. Canada has a big problem with the PRC too. So
they do have a big PRC problem, and of their own creation.
PRC problem. If there's one thing that the Western countries that matter have a problem with, it's that. So from the Japanese through the Germans, everybody's got a China problem. And if Trump is smart, which I know he is because he found his way back into the White House, if his people make the right move, they use these things like scalpels and they work closely with our allies. I need to beg out, boys, because I'm running out of time. But just to give you 5 things to watch on China. Watch China, watch the movement of Chinese ships, watch the movement of Chinese aircraft in and out of places like Latin America and Africa, but also watch what they do in the Paracels and the Spratlys. It's going to get down to very hands-on engagement in the next 30 to 45 days because they're trying to set new rules and they're trying to do it on a 1-to-1 with the Philippines, 1-to-1 with Indonesia, 1-to-1 with Vietnam. And if those countries are smart, they'll pull together and interrupt as you guys described it, the salami slicing will be interrupted. And you got to start dropping the whole mortadella, right? The Philippines needs to behave like a giant salami stick and smack these bastards around when they seize little fishing boats. And it needs to be done uniformly, and it needs to be done in a coordinated way. I hope the countries have the ability to do it. The United States cannot directly do it because that's what China's looking for at this point. If we directly involve ourselves on behalf of a single member of ASEAN, it'll have the proper effect in ASEAN to break people free and allow them to engage the Chinese independently. We've seen Indonesia and Malaysia test that recently, and that causes me a great deal of concern.
I mean,
we've seen India re-engage and disengage up in the highlands. Everything is moving, and you need to do what Trump is doing, which is you say, look, we're going to go back to the rules that you guys didn't like, and we have to stick to it in a very disciplined way. And we cannot have the Congress sniping at the executive this time. And so he needs to be careful, and the Hill needs to be careful, and they need to be very disciplined about the need to do this and do it quickly, because our economy doesn't have the depth because of the national debt that's been engaged. We need to be very careful. This is our one chance to do it, in my opinion.
Do I hear you saying the Philippines is the hill that we need to kind of die on in the?
No, I don't think it's the hill. The Philippines is just one of them. We cannot do a bilateral push with the Philippines because the Vietnamese and the Malaysians and the Indonesians will need to be on board. We need to harmonize that piece. And I know this isn't how Trump looks at the world, according to what we hear. But let's see what these guys do. If they are smart, they will go to all of these aggrieved countries that have publicly had a problem with the Chinese, the PLAN and the Coast Guard in the last, let's say, 6 to 12 months. And they will say, we're going to support you like we're supporting the Philippines, and tell the Philippines and give the Philippines the ability to support its neighbors too, right? Yeah. So if you empower the Philippines to support the Vietnamese and the Malays and the Indonesians as possible, you put a lot of pressure on the PRC, and that needs to happen. So I believe that will happen if they're smart.
Well, I was very encouraged by that phone call day of the election day. The Indonesian president called, and it seemed like a very good phone call. So hopefully, a very perfect phone call. I just hope to see that there is some appreciation in the Trump regime that's an actual area that we need to become more engaged in. So,
well, just pray to the gods of PACOM and see if it happens.
Yeah. Amen,
well,
brother.
Hey, Jim, I know you're taking off, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time, man. Like,
No, it's good to see
legitimately,
you.
it's always
It's good
a
to see you.
pleasure having you
Sorry, I'm too crazy busy, but all
Absolutely.
good. Be good, guys.
Thanks.
Hey, we'll see you.
Smart guy, that Jim. Glow in the dark for $2 says Cope 29 reminds me of a shakedown. It's funny. We're gonna get ready to talk about Cope 29 here in a second. Glow in the dark for $5 here says we need to do reclassification of developing country India, China, and a bunch of these other countries are no longer small, underdeveloped countries. I've always kind of scratched my head on some of that classification as well. I mean, Joe, these undeveloped countries are trying to take. I mean, the U.S. Let's be honest, they're trying to take the U.S. to the cleaners.
Sure. None of them are actually underdeveloped. Some of their parts of their countries are, but as an overall whole, they're fully developed just like everyone else. So,
oh yeah, I mean, it's any country with its own movie industry is not underdeveloped. I mean, India, I'm looking at you. China, I'm looking at you.
Bruh, let one of these days I need to introduce you to Zimbabwe cinema, or should I say Rhodesia cinema? But
the sorry state of Rhodesian cinema. All right.
I don't know about that. I mean, who killed Captain Alex? You know, you'll get it eventually.
All right, so let's move on to our next story here. You know, I hate talking about these COPE things, but it's one of those kind of things when I literally could see a war coming out of one of these climate change. You know, like you didn't pay us the money you said you were going to do, almost like some sort of international blackmail. China looks to step into global vacuum as Trump vows to pull the U.S. back. I thought this was interesting. I mean, because clearly China is looking for its opportunities on the world stage to kind of to spread their wings a little bit. And so maybe some of this is where you might see it. So with Trump's climate skepticism, China really is looking to step in into the global climate talks, right? But let's be honest. If Trump says, fine, you do whatever you want to do, I can't imagine that it's going to have a real effect to the U.S. at all. Now, a lot of people were worried about the Paris Accords, that Trump would pull us out of that, and that also that there was what was that thing that Obama had negotiated like in 2015, but they didn't have an opportunity to finish it up, and Trump said no. It was some sort of a trade deal with China and Pacific. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, but
I can't remember what it was called though.
Yeah, I don't know, the Pacific Trade Alliance or something like that. But
yeah, so somebody in the chat will remember. Anyway, the point of that is that it's like, oh, we're gonna get if we don't make the deals, if we're not the one leading the deals, then China is going to lead the deal, and it'll be all for the benefit of China, right? TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Thank you. I knew the chat would square us away. And so this ultimately, the argument you'll get here is essentially the argument that the liberal hegemonies were crying about over the TPP. If we're not involved, then we won't be able to set the agenda. That's the problem. They want to set the agenda. My rationale is when you're the strongest country in the world, whatever you think is important becomes the agenda, not some sort of, agreement between a rabble of countries. I mean, if the BRICS want to go off and do their own thing, they'll let them go off and do their own thing. I don't think that we have to get involved necessarily. I mean, am I missing something, guys?
No. The way you combat BRICS is by not making the U.S. dollar the absolute fucking worst thing in the world to deal with. That's it. All we have to do is stop acting like asshats.
Let's see. Also looking at this. So China, one of the world's leaders in renewable energy technologies, presenting basically a contrast between their policies and Trump's policies. And China, guys, let's be honest. China's providing significant, climate finance. So like they're willing to put money on the barrelhead to kind of get these countries to do what they want to do. So the idea is that this COPE money, at the last minute, the agreement that went through was $300 billion for underdeveloped countries to help them recover from natural disasters caused by climate change. Now, quick question. How do you figure out if a flood is a climate change related flood or not? Because let's be honest, they can't all be climate change. Or wait a second. They are.
They are if they want them to be, right? I think it's any natural disaster which is strategically advantageous to China to provide aid for is the answer to that question.
Uh-oh. Somebody's sharpshooting you there from the chat that watch. You better check your facts next time.
No, he's completely correct. It was Uganda. He's completely correct. But yeah, that's what I meant. Is Uganda has a film industry, Scott. I wouldn't call them developed.
Well,
I believe Uganda is also where we got the great film "The Gods Must Be Crazy."
That's correct, I believe. Yeah, and I really do like that film. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Cinematic masterpiece, such that it was.
Is that the one where the Coke bottle fell from the sky?
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that. We actually, I want to say like somebody that I was hanging out with rented that in the 80s, on VHS cassette. And it was like, what am I watching? So from this, so I'll be honest with you, if this is one downside, if you look at the downsides to a kind of a pullback, an American pullback, right? If we don't really hyper engage in areas that are of great concern to the U.S., then we will create vacuums in areas that we care about, right? So a great example is what's happened with China and South and Central America. Joe, we provided these, we didn't uphold the Monroe Doctrine, and thus, because of that, we provided broad swaths of country south of the border that, China has now filled the power gap. The Belt and Road Initiative is, if China wants to do international trade, that's fine. And if countries want to take their money for the services they're providing, that's fine too.
Like, legitimately, I've said this before. All we have to do to counteract what China does on the global stage is stop acting like asshats. Jim has said it before as well. Just untie American businesses. We want to be able to compete. It's the unbelievable amount of U.S. regulations that prevent us from being able to do so.
Well, that's what prices us out, right? U.S. regulations. If we were to drop a lot of those, we would certainly be far more competitive on the world market.
Well, and ironically enough, Trump allegedly has an entire Department of Government efficiency that he's setting up to do exactly that. Hopefully, that will be of some assistance.
Let's once again pop the bubble of hope and remind everyone that it is simply just an advisory board, and deep state is not just going to opt out of itself.
And die. Yeah,
let me back Joe up on that real quick. Jimmy Carter ran a fun advisory board on election security, and do you know what we did with the recommendations? The exact opposite. No. Worse than that. We did the exact opposite of every single one of the recommendations they made.
It would be interesting to go back to that and actually look at what their recommendations were. Like, are they the kind of recommendations that everybody's talking about nowadays with voter security and
yes, it is.
Voter IDs,
mail-in voting being an entirely unsecure method of voting, and that it's very easily gamed and cheated. Switching to single-day voting was on the recommendation. Paper ballots was on the recommendation list. All of it. And we've moved as far away from the recommendations as we possibly can.
Committees and things like this make us all feel good. Oh, good, look, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And at the end of the term, we realize, oh, they never actually did that.
Well, the irony is the fastest way I can think of for Donald Trump to delegitimize the mandate that he was given is to do exactly what you're saying there, Joe. Is to set up a feel good committee that put some proposals forth, and then all right, we'll get to those after in the second term, or not the second term, but the second half of my presidency, and it just dies on the vine for reasons. The tragedy of that would be that Donald Trump ultimately would be known as the president with the most promise and the least delivered. But I mean, hey, I am not a truth seer, so I don't know what's gonna happen. I just know what they are promising. But that's not the point of what I'm talking about here. So going back to China, I mean, so this whole idea of leadership in the climate realm, I know you guys that the three of us don't really put too much stock into climate change and all that kind of stuff. But, China is very good at control, right? They are very good at making people look to them for things that are important. What we found out in COVID was they took over leadership of things like the World Health Organization. They've got their hooks into the World Trade Organization. These are areas where once China applies enough money, essentially, to these international bureaucrats, they start dancing to China's tune. And so I think maybe that's what China's looking to do with this climate stuff. I think they're going to play the game, right? They're going to say, well, Europe is worried about climate, so we're going to tell Europe we're worried about climate too. And because of that, they'll see us as stable and sober, whereas Donald Trump seems like a raving madman because he doesn't think that climate change is a thing. Oh, by the way, China doesn't give a shit about climate change either, but that doesn't mean that they aren't willing to say something in public about that. I mean, Joe, let's be honest. I mean, China and climate change. I mean, it's like chocolate and peanut butter right there.
Yeah, well, first of all, China takes the same position that Vladimir Putin does, is that it's a ridiculous and suicidal thing than us, right? I mean, it's a stupid and suicidal thing that they're never going to do, right? All you're doing is limiting your own options and making yourself less competitive on the world market, and they laugh. So it's just absolutely silly.
Yeah, all they have to do is develop themselves, is call themselves undeveloped, and then say, "Well, we'll just keep using the coal." But hey, you guys in Europe, you need to.
I want to interrupt to talk about here, Calveris.
Yeah,
Operation Prosperity Garden. I'm sorry, but China is doing more to fight piracy than the U.S. Piracy exists across all of the oceans right now, and the only person stopping piracy in the Straits of Malacca is China, with a little bit of assistance from the Indonesian Navy. Not a single U.S. ship's involved in anti-piracy in the South China Sea, and we have a lot of ships involved in anti-piracy in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, and they're doing absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, China is actually sinking pirate ships. The one thing you can't argue with me about is international piracy. I kind of have a pretty solid handle on that.
And I invite Joe to correct me if I'm wrong here, but China manages pirates in a different way as well. A lot of the pirate clans that we're worried about as the West, we're worried about because China is essentially in league with them and telling them where to go. And if China said, hey, stop that dumb bullshit or we're going to come after you, they'd fucking stop.
Well, China does real politic with it. They know that if you give them a certain amount of money, they'll go after somebody else's shipping. And I urge you to look up a company called Sinogard, which is a Chinese maritime security company, which is actually part of the PLA, but we pretend it's not, much like Wagner and the Russians. But it secures shipping throughout West Africa and the South Atlantic. So I will point out that China does a significant amount in securing international shipping, not out of the good for the world, but for the good for China, right? So
I know that this is switching topics, but yeah, I've been seeing the conversation in chat, and as a guy who has really bad knees and lower back because of exactly
don't
this,
ruin your gear.
do do not run in your gear if you can avoid it.
At best, if you're going to put on full gear, do the airborne shuffle, or as we call it in the Marines, the recon shuffle. More of a jog walk than a run. So
yeah. So my personal recommendation, this is just me and the things that I learned, is if you need to run, it's like because you actually need to. There isn't a reason, like there's a safety reason to run, right, in your gear. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. What I'm saying is that when you're training with your stuff, just walk at a fast clip, but a walk, not something that causes you to do that hop motion you do with a run where you're impacting on that lead foot, because that absolutely just destroys the cartilage in your knees, and it's bad on your hips too.
Yeah, Scott's exactly correct. Just assess the amount of damage you're going to take if you don't run, and understand that running in full gear will cause damage. It's long-term damage. So if you're going to be running in your gear, it's because you need to get out of the way of deadly fire.
If you want a great workout, go ahead, Joe.
This is why we have quick releases on our rucks, right? In combat, if you need to run, dump the ruck and run. So.
Yeah. I was just going to suggest, one of the things that I do for physical fitness is I do a weekly 8-mile, 9-mile ruck march, and I try to do it at a 15 to 18-minute pace. I have about 35 pounds on my back, and I don't – I'll be honest with you, my last two or 3 miles are generally slower than an 18-minute pace. So, I would never, that's not even a super fast walk. Like a 15-minute pace. Now that's kind of a fast walk. So, you can get a lot out of just, and you don't even have to go that far either. Look at doing 3 miles, try to keep a 17-minute pace. You'll find it's not super easy to do.
Hey, do we,
speaking of the concept with the layup.
Piracy, do we have that clip of the pirates attacking the U.S. Navy? Because
the one from earlier.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah, I'll find it.
Scott we were just watching it, so.
Yeah, that was
some pirates decided not to learn ship profiles and attempted to board what they thought was a merchant ship underway, and they got a little surprise.
I think
big
that was
box with a barrel sticking out of it on the deck should have been your first clue.
I think this is it.
Yeah. It's War Monitor clip. I got it right here. I'll drop it in the private chat.
You got it.
It's a fun clip.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those. This is what you call the Darwin Award of pirating.
What's surprising is the number of boats involved.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 up front, and each of them has multiple people on it. This is not like
first one is like, oh wait, this is the wrong target. It's out.
This is where they're using. They're shooting this one up right here. These guys are basically like, oh, we done effed up.
Yeah, this is the wrong boat. Which way is shore from here?
Now, there we go. Something set that one on fire.
Yeah. One of these is about to take a hit to the engine compartment.
And those guys are swimming for dear life.
That was good. Oh, that dude those guys jumping into the water on fire. Oops.
No. Anyway, I thought that was a fun clip there, and it kind of just
target is on fire and adrift. Look at all them swimmers out there. Oh boy.
All right.
They got sharks in the Gulf of Aden?
I don't think so.
Too bad.
I'm sure they do. Yeah. Go for the
have what?
Yeah, it's a hot water sharks.
Yeah. Actually, the Gulf of Aden is one of the most shark-infested waters in the world.
So. Oh, excellent. Very good.
The closer you get to Mogadishu, the worse you get in sharks. So
All right. So I don't know if you guys heard this or not. Speaking of South America and things that areas that we should have done a better job of keeping the Chinese out of, China's new port in Peru, strategic threat to U.S. security. You think?
they have ports
Maybe.
all the way up and down the western coast of South America and Central America, and we just say, "Oh, okay, not our country. We don't care."
Right. Yeah. Monroe, what?
I mean, if I was going to land an invading force, why would I land it on a hostile shore when I could land it on a friendly shore and drive north?
That's right. And take every country over, essentially, like, secure, control of every country en route all the way up.
I think they already have that. China's entire foreign policy is about controlling the other nation, putting them in so much debt that China gets to call the shots, and that's what they've done with everyone in South America.
Earlier this year, Boularte, he's the president of Peru, traveled to Beijing, strengthening Sino-Peruvian ties, cementing Peru's position as the second largest recipient of Chinese foreign direct investment in Latin America. Notably, this includes China's southern power grid, acquisition of Peru's electricity distribution, placing 100% of its critical infrastructure under CCP control. I mean, just listen to that. Peru, 100% of their power grid under CCP control. In stark contrast, the White House failed to engage with Boularte during her 2023 visit to Washington, missed a key opportunity to counter Beijing's growing influence. This is what happened when you have a geriatric president that doesn't have any kind of a vision for the foreign policy of the Western Hemisphere.
This is why everyone talks about the global South and it having been neglected by everyone except China.
Yeah.
So
let's see. The port inauguration coincided with Asian Pacific Economic APEX summit in Lima, where U.S. President Joe Biden and the leaders of 21 member economies convened. The timing underscores a stark reality. While the United States watched from the sidelines, the CCP was actively drawing Latin America deeper into its orbit. Now, the one thing that I can say is I think within a relatively short period of time, and by relatively, I mean like less than a decade of hard work, you could make major gains for the U.S. I mean, let's be honest, proximity does have some big advantages. The problem is ultimately kind of like what you were saying, Watcher. The United States just needs to stop being such a damn asshole to all these other countries and treating them like oh, well, your human rights records are terrible, or well, you can't burn charcoal, that's bad for the climate. These are the kind of bullshit things. Oh, well, by the way, what have you done for your trans kids lately? We need to make sure that we have gender affirming care in Peru before we worry about anything else. I mean, this is the kind of thing that is causing the previous administration to trip over its own feet when it comes to diplomacy. Chinese shipping giant Costco owns a 60% stake in Peru's Chancay port, which will serve as a critical node in China's Belt and Road Initiative and its first logistical hub in Americas. Joe, what would you like to see done in this region, kind of as a good first step by the United States and kind of trying to get back in the game?
Well, first acknowledge that they exist and have valid concerns, right? We tend to laugh at them and look at them as backwards. That's a problem. Brazil is the 8th largest economy in the world, largest country in South America, largest military in South America, and was an ally during World War II. We have neglected that, haven't honored that sacrifice. So first, I would say, return to honoring what they are. They are our southern flank, and they are our friends. If we would if we hadn't spent so much time trying to do exactly what China's doing now in the 70s, they would probably trust us a little bit more. China's doing it with the carrot. We used his stick, and it didn't work out very well for us. So
yeah, I agree with that, Joe. I think not respect. There's just a bit of lack of respect, I think, to a lot of these countries.
It's not taking them seriously. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is that we've put, I hate to always go back to Ukraine, but I'm going to go back to Ukraine, right? We've put hundreds of billions of dollars. We basically stacked it up and set it on fire in Ukraine, right? And a quarter of that money would have gone a hell of a long way if we had did foreign direct investment in these countries in South America and Central America with that money. Now, I'm not suggesting that we do that because we don't have a whole lot of money to do, largesse from the U.S. government to these, like direct payments from the U.S. government to these countries. But what we could do is we have the strongest economy in the world, and we can, coordinate with countries, with our companies to, have, meaningful trade opportunities and industrial expansion into South and Central America. I'm sure they would love first world jobs in these countries, and that's something that we could bring them. But we've just ignored that. We still have the strongest economy in the world. We have the largest economy in the world.
Well, longest or largest does not equal strongest.
Well, that's fair. I don't know that, if you want to say strongest, I think there would be an argument that maybe the EU has a stronger economy or whatever, but I would disagree with that. I don't think China's economy is stronger because it's internally focused. Let's see what the Fed post there says. Yeah, but Scott, you gotta think about your return on investment. Those South American countries were only offering a 5% kickback. The big guy wanted 10. That's a good point. Just China was given a better kickback, I guess, right? Don't get me started on John Kerry. Do not get me started on John Kerry. All right, let me kind of jump down further in here. Anyway, so I don't know. It goes on and it kind of lists a lot of different kind of, different points on this, but ultimately it comes back to the same thing. We lost a race without even knowing the race was happening. And, and that's to our peril. China is absolutely taking us to the cleaners in Central and South America. Now, this is interesting. Now, Joe, this next story kind of underlined something that so many people want to ignore in the U.S., right? So this is a Guardian story, and these kinds of stories have been kind of thin on the ground for the last couple of years because everyone wants to see, oh, well, Russia and China are natural allies, right? These are the countries that absolutely are looking to kind of form a new bloc to fight against America, right? And Russia is our enemy, right? And they see China as no, that's not true. And this is a perfect example of that. China, unnerved by Russia's growing ties with North Korea, claims U.S. official. Now, I don't know who this U.S. official is, but I think they're right. And now, Joe, this absolutely harkens back to the kind of the split that you had with China and Russia, in supporting Vietnam, right? China was giving them a lot of weapons early on in the war, but ultimately Vietnam sided with Russia, and it was Russian advisors, and it was a lot of Russian material that ended up going into Vietnam by the end of the war, and that which led to Vietnam fighting China in the late 70s. I
believe that was actually when Vietnam intervened in Cambodia that led to it. But yes,
Right. Yeah. That's right. But the point is that people think it's just hunky dory, the natural alliance between Russia and China, but that couldn't be further from the
well,
truth.
in the late '60s, China and Russia fought 2 short border wars
Yeah.
over Siberia.
Yeah. Well, Northern Mongolia and that whole thing, and yeah, it's a pretty interesting period of time. China sees Siberia and that whole area as an area of expansion potentially. It's pretty sparsely populated, so they feel like they could use some
And one of
elbow
the
room.
ways in which they waged that fifth generation warfare is again illegal immigration into Siberia to suddenly have an ethnic Chinese population.
Right, and then that gives your Casa, belly to come in to declare war or to protect the Chinese citizens that are being
much like Vladimir Putin did in Western Ukraine,
in Ukraine,
or
exactly
Eastern
right.
Ukraine.
Well, he was just taking all those Russian speaking Ukrainians and he was offering them Russian passports, and then calling them Russians. Okay, well, they didn't care because they were Russian. They were Soviets, then they were Ukrainians, and they were Russians.
Over the course of history, Ukraine has been Russia more than it has not.
That's right. That's something that most people forget. And oh, by the way, Ukraine is where Russia comes from anyway, so they're essentially the same people.
Correct.
So it's to split that hair is absolutely stupid. Let me read a little bit of this article, and then we'll kick the ball around a little bit. China's increasingly comfortable with North Korea's engagement with Russia. He is leaning into the growing debate amongst U.S. security partners in Asia whether China supports the decision of North Korea's Kim Jong-un to send 10,000 troops. Now, Kim Jong-un has been a client state of China for quite a while, or North Korea rather, and so. That's why I thought this was actually a pretty smart move on Kim's part to kind of start engaging more directly with Putin. Right now, it's funny, North Korea is in a position of power. Putin needs things. He is. I wouldn't say Putin's in trouble, but he is definitely being engaged in a war where you've lost hundreds of thousands. I think that's safe to say that the Russians have lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the Western Front, if you will. I think it makes sense that Putin needs friends at this period of time. And we've seen direct military support from Kim up to and including troops. And so that makes sense to me. Now, the interesting thing is China is, of course, like, they never trust Russia, right? China never trusts Russia. But seeing their boy Kim go over hanging out with Putin, signing direct agreements
He's
with
cheating
Putin.
on me.
Exactly. You knew exactly where I was going with that. Let's see. In a rare, you're starting to see some weird stuff come out of all this, right? Even China's making economic overtures to Japan, for instance, and remove a buoy installed inside a Japan economic exclusion zone. So, I mean, there are some strange bedfellows coming out of this whole thing. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. All right. I wanted to kind of move a little more quickly here. Let's skip this last China-based story and move on to segment 2, because this first one is, this is just a reminder, Joe. People forget oftentimes, especially our NAFO bro, trolls that follow us around from time to time. They forget about this map because this map is reality on the ground. So this is starting in the beginning of the year. This is essentially the front line along the Donbass. You got Bakhmut there in the center, Chazayar, Donetsk City, Pokrovsk, Kurovka. And so you saw how it just expanded outwards. I mean, Russia is absolutely. I mean, just look, right coming out of Donetsk, that's a huge amount of land that they've taken. And
But I've been
anybody.
told that they're losing. Russia is losing.
Well, that's so they say. Alpha Omega for $2 says North Korea can really do this without China's approval. Well, obviously they can. They just put it in the BRICS family stuff, right? As long as within the family. All right. I just wanted to remind you guys of what's been going on this year thus far. And because of that, this is the real reason, right, that you're seeing this next story pop up. U.S. Now, this is not a joke. These are real people that are suggesting this. U.S. officials discuss giving nuclear weapons to Ukraine. Let me repeat that. U.S. officials discuss giving nuclear weapons to Ukraine. Didn't Patrick Fox tell us that there's no way in hell they would give them Apache helicopters and F-16s? That was like one of the final,
Yeah, of course.
the final predictions he made on one of his last appearances on this program. And I said, come on. I mean, it's just a matter of time. They've pretty much given them everything else. Now, they haven't given them Apaches yet, but they did give them F-16s. And now they're suggesting nuclear weapons.
Well, but
The only reason we won't give them an Apache is we don't want the Russians to end up with an Apache.
We don't want to, right? Exactly right.
Well, but Scotty, this is just us, destroying the Russian war machine at bottom dollar.
Yeah, at the blood, at the price of the blood of Ukrainian manhood.
Well, no, if this happens, it'll be a lot more than that.
Let's see. American
This is
officials
a ludicrous idea.
Yeah, this is a dangerous idea. American officials who are briefed on the intelligence community's assessment told the Times that the weapons would not alter the challenging situation in Kiev is currently facing. U.S. spy agencies have assessed that speeding up the provisions of weapons, ammunition, material for Ukraine will do little to change the course of the war in the short term. Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, guys, we've been saying all along that the thing that's keeping this war going is the steady supply of American crack.
War welfare.
Exactly right. So desperate to bolster Ukraine's standing in the war, the Biden administration is looking at a range of serious escalations. The U.S. and European officials are discussing deterrence as a possible security guarantee for Ukraine, such as stockpiling a conventional arsenal. Several officials even suggest that Mr. Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken from it after the fall of the Soviet Union. It makes me think then that we did maintain some of those weapons. According to some officials who spoke to the Time, the administration believes that Russian President Vladimir Putin won't significantly escalate the war until Trump returns to the Oval Office. The irony is I think it's the exact opposite, Joe. I think Putin's trying to do everything he can to get as much land as possible because he knows once Trump gets in, there's a very high likelihood that Trump will come up with a deal, both for the Russian and then also a limitation on the Ukrainians that will keep them from being able to continue to fight. Go ahead.
Well, and to bear that out, Sergei Lavrov gave a speech somewhere yesterday wherein he said that the Biden administration is doing everything in its power to stoke up tensions and provoke a conflict that the Trump administration will have to deal with. So exactly. Russia at least has her eyes open and knows what's going on.
Well, and I think, I'll be honest with you, I think at this point, and while I do believe it's a war of attrition, Russia will win, but it will also be a very costly war. 2 more years of Russian fighting in Ukraine is going to, let's be honest, there's going to be a lot of dead Russians, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And so because of that, I think Russia is ready. Russia and Putin are primed for a deal. And he can declare victory, and with if he's able to retain basically with the land they've already seized, then he would take his ball, go home, and declare victory. And
Well,
I think
let's remember they have been from day one trying to seek some sort of negotiated settlement, but it's NATO that has shut that down every time.
Exactly right. There was a negotiated settlement on the table early on, and the West talked Ukraine out of that. And the reason why is so the West could then engineer a Ukrainian defeat at some number of years later that would allow them to launder trillions of dollars through Ukraine in reconstruction aid. That's exactly what they want to do. And they're not in it for the Ukrainians. They're in it for themselves. It always goes back to the grift. All right, let me just
and lest you think it's only us involved in the grift, breaking news, we are friend Sim Warlord. The UK and France are once again renewing calls to put their own troops on the ground in Ukraine.
Let's see. The escalation allowing Russia to strike Ukraine with U.S. supply weapons has diminished with the election of Mr. Trump. Biden administration. By the way, did you guys know that Biden administration did not consult with Donald Trump and his transition team prior to doing that?
Yes. Although
they in fact met with Donald Trump in person. Donald Trump came to the White House and met with Biden in person, and Biden sat there smiling at him. And we all kind of joked that, oh, he's smiling because he's happier that Trump's going to be president than Kamala. Well, in fact, I think that smile was like, I'm getting ready to hand you a sandwich of shit, and you have no idea what I'm getting ready to do.
I think that assumes that Biden has any control or even cognition over what our government is doing. An assumption I am not willing to make.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think he's involved. I just don't think he's the shot caller. You know what I mean? I think he's involved as much as he needs to be, but I think you guys are probably right. Somebody else
is this where I bring up that pesky Constitution again?
Yeah. Let's see. Anyway, I just wanted to say
don't
here
forget,
that
let me hold on though. While I'm on the constitutional topic, never ever forget that Barack Obama famously said, "There's a lot of things I want to do, but the Constitution keeps me from doing them."
Yeah. Oh, but Obama broke the Constitution anyway on a regular basis. I mean, that guy's executive orders on the regular did things that only laws should be able to do. And the only way he got around with it was because he used already appropriated money for other things from the spending bills.
No, he got away with it because every time anyone opposed him, he screamed racism.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true. But let's be honest, Joe. I mean, during Obama's term, that was the period of time where the Uniparty was in charge, and the GOP didn't care what he was doing. They just kind of like, oh, okay, no problem. There were a couple voices in the wilderness like Ron Paul and a few others, but honestly, there was nobody really, fighting that fight back then. At least not with any real voice. All right. I think that's enough on that topic. Nuclear weapons for Ukraine, about the worst idea ever. Speaking of nuclear weapons for Ukraine, the NATO chief, Root, talks security with Trump in Florida. So the NATO chief came to bend the knee at Mar-a-Lago. I think this is an interesting development. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte earlier expressed willingness to meet Donald Trump at his Florida estate. The president-elect is expected to again push NATO members to ramp up defense expenditures in his second term. I get the feeling that this is a nervous smile, probably taken at the beginning of the meeting. Look at Donald Trump; he's looking right at him, and he's got pursed lips. So he's
look at the weak handshake he's trapped him into.
Yeah, he's got. What do I do?
That gross European fish handshake bullshit.
I know. Let's see here. The two leaders discuss a range of global security issues facing the alliance. Trump is expected to push NATO members to pay more in defense expenditures. Well, yeah, in his second term, pushing allies to spend 3% of their GDP on defense. In the past, Trump has also claimed that he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell you want to countries which he deems are not paying their bills. That's funny. That is also a misparaphrase there, but anyway. Trump has said he also opposes further military aid to Ukraine, an idea which many European NATO members find disheartening. Trump, maybe NATO members, if they want to send money to Ukraine, that they should send their own damn money. Trump has nominated Matthew Whitaker. Oh, that's right. He was the acting AG, right? Towards the end, Matt Whitaker, that guy with a bald head. He's going to be the U.S. ambassador to NATO. That should be interesting. Whitaker is expected to pursue the America First agenda during talks with NATO allies. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. Let's see. I don't really care about that part. Root wants to talk about growing North Korean Russia ties. Speaking of growing North Korea-Russia ties, that actually transitioned us nicely into this next story. Western officials claim North Korean general wounded in recent Ukrainian strike. Now,
couldn't happen to a better guy.
Well, I take all this with a grain of salt. I mean, these are, NATO is extremely convenient for Europe. You're not wrong there, Blaine. I take all this with a grain of salt, these reports, like this. That being said, I agree, Joe. You go to the front. I mean, the front's a dangerous place. Maybe you shouldn't be there. I don't know. Details are scant, but an incident was vaguely described in which the Wall Street Journal, in which it is the first time Western officials are saying a high-ranking North Korean military officer has become a casualty in the escalating Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if this is part of the command team that has been sent along. I would assume that's exactly what this is. And they're embedded, liaison officers that are embedded within the Russian forces. These guys probably all speak Russian, North Koreans that speak Russian, and are there to essentially work through any issues. Western officials didn't disclose how the senior North Korean officer was wounded or his identity. North Korean mission to the United Nations did immediately respond to a request for comment on the strike, which has been described in Western intelligence reports. I wouldn't be surprised if Western intelligence knew exactly who this guy is and what happened. Recent international reports have separately alleged that thousands of North Korean troops are in the Kursk region assisting Russian efforts to repel occupying Ukrainian troops. Joe, the recent report is that Russia has taken back half of the land from Ukraine's peak at one point. And with all of these North Korean mercs and the increase, and evidently it's like 50,000 total people on the Russian side facing off against 25,000 on the Ukrainian side. That's not a fight that I'd want to be involved in. You guys have any other thoughts on that? Don't be a North Korean general, I guess.
Hey, the front's a dangerous place. That's where all the bullets and bombs are.
Yeah. Probably for North Korean generals, the French are looking for opportunities to make it even more dangerous as France backs Ukraine's firing its long-range missiles at Russia. For the first time. So France has now followed the U.S. and U.K. And saying the missiles that they have donated, the French Scout missiles, which are the same as the U.K. Storm Shadow, just different, same missile, different name. They are now giving them authorization to use them across to strike at targets inside of Russia. So from that standpoint, that means by what Russia has said that they would then be at war with Russia. The principle has been set. Our messages to Zelensky has been well received. He says he called for the West not to set any express red lines, which, red lines. Well, what could that do? UK Observer is a little different from Snake Island. Totally happened, bro. After the end of this, he was pressed in an interview if it could mean sending French troops into the war. And he said, "We will not discard any option." What an idiot. Why would you do this? Why would you suggest that you would possibly send troops? The French diplomat continued, "We will support Ukraine as intensely and as long as necessary." Why? Because it is our security that's at stake. I'm curious how they figure that.
Yeah, how
Joe.
so?
I'm not quite sure how that works.
I'm going to need to have him show his work here.
Yeah, where is the French border touch the Ukrainian border? And then, of course, they want to continue to push for NATO to join Ukraine to join NATO. We are open to extending an invitation, and so in our discussions with the friends and allies and friends and allies of Ukraine, we are working to get them closer to our position. Of course, we will have to spend more if we want to do more. I think we have to face these new challenges, he said. I think these countries need to be worrying about their own defense, and they need to stop worrying about Ukraine's, because I think Trump's going to be a wake-up call for these guys. I mean, he was a wake-up call last time on the international stage, and I can't imagine he's going to be any softer than he was before. Derna says for $5, France's foreign policy isn't ego-based like ours is. It's entirely mercenary. They might be trying to squeeze some extra energy deals out of Russia. I mean, you're not entirely wrong.
Well, that's true, because let's recall the 60s when France fought a shadow war against the rest of NATO for control of parts of Africa, down to where they literally authorized the killing of the Secretary General. So,
yeah. Gentlemen, that's all I've got to talk about for today. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. We're a little over time, so apologies. We're at 2 hours and 8 minutes. Joe, looking to the week, where your eyeballs at?
I've noticed a little bit more organizing on the left, and keep in mind that we have a holiday this week, so that might push things towards protest. Holiday weekend allows those people to have a little more travel, a little more availability to get to the hot spots for some shenanigans. On that note, I'll be spending the holidays with a mutual friend of ours, so that's kind of cool. Cool. Something I meant to mention earlier. I totally forgot. So I was wrapped around the axle on some other issue going on here. We are creating a military surplus room here at Camp Ponderosa. For anyone who comes to classes and might need a key piece of gear, we're bringing some of the extra military surplus that we have available with the food pantry and their thrift store. And we're going to create sort of a kit welfare section where we've got like used gear that we all have had that we don't use anymore, thrown in a box for guys who show up who might not have the newest cool guy gear. They can go through the box, pick out what they need, and get out there. So more and more cool stuff on the Camp Ponderosa side. So going to be fun. I'm actually heading out right now to go and look at a whole bunch more surplus stuff. The weird thing is yesterday, Al and I were going through it all. I guess Saturday, me and Alan were going through all this stuff that's already here at the camp. And I'm building this pile of stuff that I want. And he goes, "Let me know when we get enough for you to trade me that rifle for the pile of gear." But sadly for Al, his wife intervened and said, "No, just please take it all." So I got to keep the rifle, and I got some more cool gear. But,
very good.
Stuff.
Hey, by the way, Joe was very kindly retweeted out that announcement on that Red Dawn pattern stuff. Go to 0241tactical.com and it says that pre-orders at that website are open until 15 December, and they've got a lot of cool patterns, right? A lot of kind of let's be honest, some of them aren't like the best pattern, but they're cool patterns, right? And sometimes
Like
cool is
Marine
better
Corps
than
frog
the
skin,
best.
man. That stuff was
I,
good. 1942 frog skin.
I think it's
Just
legit.
cool.
I mean, all of these patterns, to one extent or another, are legit patterns. It's just a matter of finding the right use case for them. So, me personally, I love me some Night Desert. You know that. I'm a sucker for it. I know. Our friend over at
Chris Cheeky?
Chris Dickey has had some of that stuff, but our friend that we met out there, the tactical gear company,
Exumbris.
Exumbris, thank you. Exumbris is making some Night Desert stuff in the near future, so
I might
maybe
have
I
a
need
Night
to.
Desert pouch he just sent me. So
I mean, he knows of my predilections towards that pattern. So
he sent me some old chocolate chip too. I really like chocolate chip. That was a good one.
oh, the old desert.
6-color desert, yeah.
The only problem with that is that in Iraq, that's what all of the Iraqi army was wearing at the
Yeah.
time, and it was like, it's like you just kind of I associated it with them. Now that being said, the desert tiger stripe is what I associated with the Afghan commandos, and those guys were but they were actually good fighters, so you didn't begrudge them.
I've always said this about Afghans: the willingness to fight and bravery was never a problem. There's a legit warrior culture.
Well, they had other problems in that country.
They had some shortfallings in the skill area, but they were always ready to fight.
Yeah. Watcher, looking towards the rest of the week. What's your take?
Oh, well, this week I think it's finally starting to set in on some of these false U.S. elites that they're no longer just going to be allowed to get their way permanently and totally, and to tread on absolutely every one of the rest of us in order to get so. And I would look for their freakouts and attempts at social manipulation to increase exponentially the closer we get to January.
Yeah, I think Joe, I think you mentioned something about the holiday coming up. I think the Black Friday is going to be a potential target for protests, and I think it potentially also could be a target for terrorism. So keep your head on a swivel if you decide to do some Black Friday shopping, and if your wife, and by the way, this is a good opportunity to kind of, like, let's face it, a lot of us guys, we don't want anything to do with Black Friday shopping, but our wives or our family members want to go out and do that. That's okay to do, but this might be a good opportunity for you to kind of exercise some of your emergency contact protocols, things like that. What are your plans? Where
maybe carry a radio.
Carry a radio, and then also have a good kind of like, well, if something bad happens at this shopping center, you need to go to this place first, and then and then get back home or something along these lines. Make sure that they're contacting because they may not be able to just immediately go home. They may get stuck, inside a cordon or something like that if there's some sort of security event. So just make sure you've got a good backup plan for all that stuff. God forbid anything bad happens. Let's pray it doesn't. Like I said, I just because I may have a premonition of bad things to happen doesn't mean I want that to be the case. I actually hope I'm completely wrong, and everything. I end up being a paranoid old guy who talked you into buying something you never had to use. All right, well, that would be a great place to be at the end of the day if we can avoid violence. So, all right. Gentlemen, that's all I've got. Thank you, chat. You guys are awesome. I want to say a special thank you to Jim for jumping in with us. It's always, I know his time is very valuable, so I appreciate it. And thank you to Joe and Watcher. You guys always continue to bless me, being my battle buddies here on the show. I couldn't do it without you, so thank you very much. We will be back same time, same place on Wednesday. We'll probably get a little more of we'll probably do maybe one topic on domestic stuff. I tried to avoid all the domestic stuff today. And, so because there's been some developments and there's some stuff we can talk about. Looking forward to, a good holiday season. I hope you and your family have a good holidays. And until then, guys, as always, stay safe.